Welcome. Jerry, are you linked in here?
I am.
Great. So thank you all very much. I am Skip Rutherford. I'm Dean of the University of Arkansas Clinton School of Public Service. And it's my privilege to moderate this evening's session with my friend Jerry Mitchell. I want to thank the Six Bridges Book Festival for making this possible. I also want to thank you all the audience for being here, everyone for participating. Special thanks to Nathan Smith and the staff of the Central Arkansas Library System, and to Nikolai DePippa and Patrick Newton with the Clinton School of Public Service. And remember, you can purchase your books, signed copies of all the sessions at Wordsworth. I'm really honored to welcome Jerry Mitchell. Actually, Jerry, welcome back. About 10 years ago, you spoke at the school, and you talked about your interest in this subject. This was before you wrote this fantastic book about the unsolved civil rights cases, largely in Mississippi, but certainly focusing on the bombing at the church in Birmingham. Jerry Mitchell is from Texarkana, Arkansas, graduate of Harding University. He has a lot of Arkansas ties. He spent 3 decades as an investigative reporter with the Jackson Clarion Ledger. I think he started when he was age 27. He's won all sorts of awards, including MacArthur Genius Grant, Pulitzer Prize finalist. And he, upon leaving the Clarion Ledger, he started the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting, training other young journalists to be Jerry Mitchells of the future. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because we're experiencing a series of murders and killings in the last 2 or 3 years that cry out for young Jerry Mitchell. So everyone, thanks for being here. Jerry, thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing your discussion about Race Against Time. A reporter reopens the unsolved murder cases of the civil rights era. Please welcome Jerry Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Skip. Good to be with you again. We get this started. Thanks to the Six Bridges Book Festival. This is fantastic. It's great to be with you virtually in Arkansas, as you know, my old stomping ground, and it's great to be with you guys. Great to be with y'all. Yeah, so this is my book, and I don't know if you're like me, I just kind of tell stories. So that's the way I operate. But if you're anything like me, if someone tells me I can't have something, I want it like a million times worse. And so there was something in Mississippi called the Mississippi Sovereignty Commission, which was a state segregationist spy agency in Mississippi that operated from the 1950s into the 1970s. In fact, Arkansas came over and copied. There are actually documents on this. It came over and copied how Mississippi set theirs up and set up their own. So that's a whole nother story. But there were more. So all these records involving the Sovereignty Commission were sealed by the Mississippi legislature for 50 years. So when I found that out, I thought, well, there must be something in there. You know, why would they seal them for 50 years otherwise? So I began to develop sources who had access to the files, began to leak me the files. And what they showed is the same time the state of Mississippi was prosecuting Byron D. LeBeckwith, this guy in handcuffs on the left, for the murder of Medgar Evers. This other arm of the state, the Sovereignty Commission, was secretly assisting the defense trying to get Beckwith acquitted. Nobody knew that. My story ran October 1st of 1989 on that story. At the time that I wrote the story, I'll tell a tiny bit about Medgar Evers real quick, is he was a World War II veteran. He actually fought in Normandy, and he was murdered on the same night that President Kennedy gave his first civil rights speech in the nation, basically saying that the grandsons of slaves are still not free, and he was murdered. His wife and children ran outside, saw the blood, screamed, and so 27 This is Merle Evers. This is a widow of Medgar Evers. And as I mentioned, the odds were totally against this case ever being reopened, reprosecuted. There was no murder weapon left. There was no transcript of the trial. There was nothing in the court files of any kind of value. But Merle Evers, the widow of Medgar Evers, believed and she prayed, and some amazing things happened. A couple months later, Jackson police are cleaning out a closet and happen to find the box that contained the crime scene photographs of the killing of Medgar Evers, including the fingerprint of Byron D. LeBeckwith lifted from the murder weapon. A few months after that, Merle Evers shared with me her copy of the court transcript that she had saved in a safety deposit box. And a few months after that, the prosecutor in the case found the murder weapon in his father-in-law's closet, which sounds like I'm making it up. It really did happen. And so I went to go interview the killer himself, Byron D. LeBeckwith. You can probably guess how I found his house. So we talked for probably, 6 hours, I think it was all together, and just absolutely the most racist person I've ever spent serious time with. N-word this and N-word that, and he started in all the other races, and very anti-Semitic as well. He was part of what's called Christian identity, which we can talk about more later. But it was starting to get dark, and I thought, well, it's a good time to go, right? And so he insisted on like walking me out to the car, and I'm like, really? That's okay. I think I can find my way. So he walks me out to the car and says, if you write positive things about white Caucasian Christians, God will bless you. If you write negative things about white Caucasian Christians, God will punish you. If God does not punish you directly, several individuals will do it for him. And so his wife and made me a sandwich. I think you can guess what I did with the sandwich. So Byron D. LeBeckwith was arrested in that case in December of 1990. He fought extradition. At the time I went and interviewed him, he had no idea I was the one that wrote the story that got the case reopened. By now he figured it out. And so when he got in the courtroom and looked across the courtroom, he saw me and says, you see that boy over there? When he dies, he's going to Africa. I turned to a friend of mine and went, boys wanted to go to Africa. So Byron D. LeBeckwith was convicted of the murder of Medgar Evers on February 5th, 1994, in the exact same courtroom he'd been tried in 30 years earlier. And when the word guilty rang out, you could literally hear these waves of joy as they kind of cascaded down the hall till it reached a foyer full of people, black and white, just erupted in cheers. And Merle Evers and her daughter Rena cheered as well. And I just felt chills because the impossible had suddenly become possible. Not too long after Byron D. LeBeckwith was indicted, I met with this woman and her family. Her name is Ellie Damer, and she's holding a photograph of her late husband, Vernon Damer. Vernon Damer is a farmer, businessman, entrepreneur in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, which is about an hour and a half south of Jackson. And so he was totally dedicated to voting rights. And the Klan didn't like that, attacked him and his family in the middle of the night, January 10th, 1966, set their house on fire, began firing their guns into the house. Vernon Damer woke up, grabbed a shotgun, ran to the front of the house, began firing at the Klansmen so his family could escape safely out a back window. Unfortunately, the flames of the fire seared his lungs, and he died later that day. A few weeks later, in the mail came his voter registration card. He had fought his whole life for the right of all Americans to be able to vote, but never been able to cast a ballot himself. The guy who, and I might mention, Vernon Damer, by the way, 6 of his 7 sons served a total of 78 years in America's armed forces. And 4 of them were in the military at the time, and this is what they came home to see. The family home, which, to me, it's one of the most moving photographs of the civil rights movement, and not many people know it either. But the guy who ordered this attack was this guy. His name was Sam Bowers, the head of the White Knights in the KKK in Mississippi, responsible for at least 10 killings, probably 11. But Bowers had never been convicted in this killing, been tried, but never been convicted. So After the Vernon Damer family met with me, they met with the district attorney, reopened the case, acted interested, sounded like they were going to try and do something, but over time got cold feet and nothing happened. And along about this time, I got an offer to go to Ohio State to get my master's, and basically going to pay me to get my master's. I was going to get a master's for free, plus they paid me, right? So I thought, yeah, that sounds like a good deal. So I'm literally in Ohio in the spring of 1997 when I get a telephone call. And this guy says he wants to meet with me. He says he has information on the Vernon Damer case, but, we'll only do it in person. Wouldn't give me his name, nothing. So I flew back to Mississippi from Ohio, met with him and a buddy of his, and it was a couple of sons of Vernon Damer. I think almost everybody there had a gun except me. And so we met, we talked, and he's like, he's telling me all this about working with Sam Bowers, and saying, that he overheard Sam Bowers give the orders to kill Vernon Damer. And so, after he met with us, he met with the district attorney's office, they reopened the case in earnest. The guy had been the key witness back in the 1960s was this guy. Oh no, okay, here we go. I thought for a minute I froze. Is this guy, Billy Roy Pitts. Billy Roy Pitts was involved in the killing of Vernon Damer, dropped his gun, got caught, plead guilty to murder, got a license for that, plead guilty to federal charges, got 5 years for that. So I was just researching how much time he actually did. There was a bit of a joke. Almost everybody that got convicted in the Vernon Damer case didn't get the time they were supposed to get. I mean, one guy got, 10 years for arson. He only served 2 before the governor pardoned him. And it was that kind of sequence of things. They got released early, they get, pardoned, life sentence commuted, all those things were happening. The very few that did get convicted back then. And so I was checking with the Federal Bureau of Prisons to see how much time Billy Roy Pitts actually did in federal prison. And I knew it was a 5-year sentence. And then I talked to them and said, how much time do you actually serve? And the archivist who pulled this file said, well, he served 3.5 years. I said, I understand he left, because this is what I've been told. I understood he left the federal prison and went into the federal witness protection program, because I couldn't find any record for his state time. And that's what I've been told. And the archivist said, that's impossible. There was no witness protection program back then. So what it meant was Billy Roy Pitts had never served a single day of his life sentence in Mississippi. Kind of a big oversight, right? So I didn't know if this guy was alive or dead or where he was. And there was an internet's relatively new at this point, at least certainly in terms of search capabilities. And so, which was pretty much a problem for people who recall the early days of the internet. And so I don't know if this guy was alive or dead, but there was a website that you could type in somebody's name and you didn't have to have the city or the state. You could just type it in and kind of take your chances. So I did, and up it popped. Billy Roy Pitts had his address, Denham Springs, Louisiana, which is right outside of Baton Rouge, and his telephone number. So I called him. First 20 minutes of the conversation went like this. How'd you find me? How'd you find me? Like, it's on the internet. The internet, I got a listed telephone number. I'm like, I guess I'd take it up with them. So the result of my story that he had never served a single day of his life sentence, Mississippi authorities issued a warrant for his arrest. He didn't like that. In fact, he ran. And while he was on the run, he sent me this audio cassette in the mail. When I got it, I played it, and this is how it began. Jerry, I just thought I'd let you know you've ruined my life. But I promise if I talk to anybody, talk to you, so here's this tape. And on this tape proceeds to tell me all about his involvement in killing Vernon Damer, all about his involvement in also the Klan violence. So shortly after this, he turns himself into authorities. And this now leads to the arrest of Sam Bowers. This is May of 1998. In addition to Bowers, Bowers' right-hand guy was arrested too. His name was Devers Nix. And when the family brought Devers Nix in, it was like the most pitiful sight you've ever seen. They wheeled him in the wheelchair with the oxygen tank, and they get him up in front of the judge, and he's like, I can't take more than a couple steps without needing oxygen, Judge. Judge is like, well, I normally don't do this, but I'm gonna let you out without bond. A dozen days later, this is like a reporter's dream. This is where we caught him. So we got pictures of him playing golf. So he got arrested. Yeah, he loved me. So fast forward, Sam Bowers goes on trial, and guess who's there testifying to half but Devers Nix. And so he's getting ready to go testify, and his lawyer's talking to him. His lawyer, was a really good criminal defense lawyer back in the 1960s, but by this time he's in his 80s, and that's fine. But that's a detail you'll need to know. And so he's kind of explaining, you obviously have the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination at any point in time, including when you take the witness stand. You don't have to incriminate yourself. You can take the Fifth. So he's trying to work out a signaling system with his client. Now, Devers, when you get up there, if you need to take the Fifth, I'm going to raise my hand. Devers like, okay. So Devers gets up on the witness stand and starts testifying. I looked over his lawyer about 5 minutes later. He was like, fast asleep. So much for the signaling, So Devers kept right on testifying, Yeah, I was in the Klan. You try to put a positive spin on it like there is one. Well, the Klan was a benevolent organization passing out fruit baskets to the needy at Christmas. And under cross-examination, prosecutor got him, Mr. Nix, just how many fruit baskets did you pass out? And Devers says, oh, sad to say, none. So Sam Bowers was represented by this guy on the right. His name is Travis Buckley. And Travis Buckley was a lawyer for a lot of these Klan guys back in the 1960s and even into the 70s. He actually represented Byron D. LeVec, but actually represented Edgar A. Killen, who was convicted in the Mississippi Burning case later. Anyway, so Buckley, the thing you should know about Buckley, he was not just a lawyer for the Klan. He was a leader in the Klan, right? You got that? And so anyway, Billy Roy Pitts is asked, in fact, he was actually indicted for the firebombing of Vernon Dahmer at one point. Okay, so that's how connected to this he is. So Billy Roy Pitts is, testifying for the prosecution about laying out the case, who all was involved, et cetera, et cetera. Who all was at that planning meeting? Pitts is like, let's see, I was there, Sam Bowers was there, Devers Nix was there, Travis Buckley was there. And Travis Buckley, apparently didn't hear any of this. As I looked at him, and there's no recognition whatsoever. So the court reporter is like, now, what were those names again? He's like Billy Roy Pitts, Sam Bowers, Devers Nix, Travis Buckley. Now Buckley wakes up. Objection, Your Honor. I've covered a lot of trials in my life. The only trial I ever covered, a witness implicated the defense lawyer himself in the case. So Sam Bowers was convicted of the murder of Vernon Dahmer on August 21st, 1998, and sentenced to life prison, just like Byron D. LeVec was. And the sad part is, well, to date, I guess I should tell you this part. Well, let me go here first. The hate, unfortunately, that caused this has never really gone away, has it? And I mean, especially we're seeing it rise again. Just 5 years ago, a young man entered this church and killed these 9 beautiful people in Charleston. And then a few years after that, man entered this synagogue in Pittsburgh and killed 11 people. And then just last year, we had a couple of dozen people that were killed in El Paso, strictly because of the color of their skin, and it's so sad. And because he wanted to quote unquote stop the invasion, which, by the way, is the exact language that the Klan used in the summer of 1964 when they killed the 3 young civil rights activists. And of course, this year, George Floyd and so many other killings that we have seen, just horribly tragic, are just reminders of that we seem to repeat our past, unfortunately, I think, because we don't really know it a lot of times. I know that's been the reaction to my book from a lot of people that have read it. Has been like, I had no idea all these things happened. And so in terms of my own experience, I've had dozens of death threats, people trying to intimidate me or threaten me and my family, all those things. But it led to an unexpected gift, and that's the gift of living fearlessly. And living fearlessly is not about living without fear. It's about living beyond fear. Living fearlessly is about living for something greater than ourselves. Am I frozen? There we go. Living fearlessly about living for something greater than ourselves. To date now, there have been 24 convictions in these civil rights murders. And it's a matter of faith with me. I believe God's hand's been involved in these cases. But the most amazing thing I've witnessed has actually been some of the racial reconciliation. Not too long after Sam Bowers was convicted, Billy Roy Pitts testified in a hearing. And when he got done, he walked to the back of the courtroom and he ran into Mrs. Damer. And he apologized to Mrs. Damer and asked her to forgive him for killing her husband. And she forgave him. He began to cry. She began to cry. And isn't that what redemption's all about? Trying to make things right, even when they've gone so terribly wrong in the past. May God bless you in your journey of redemption. I do have a couple of quick things to say post-talk. One is, there's my book. You already saw it. This is my nonprofit, which I guess we'll talk about a little bit. And there's the website, MississippiCR.org. And this is my contact info, which I'll leave up just for a second. And if you're interested, each day on Facebook and Twitter, I post kind of today in civil rights history, and that's my email. So anyway, that's it. And I will turn it back to the powers that be here.
Can you share screen?
Yeah, I thought I did. I did share screen, didn't I? No, I don't need to share anything now. So
Okay.
I thought I unshared it. So anyway.
There we are. We're good. We're good. Hey, thank you very much. Jerry, there's so many questions that have come up, and that I'd really like to start with the influence, and I know you've said that most of them were fiction, or at least, but the two, I think they had a monumental impact on educating people. One was the film Mississippi Burning.
Yeah.
The other was the film The Ghosts of Mississippi. Can you talk about, you have a really interesting story about Mississippi Burning.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, there were kind of two events early, and I mentioned the one, the Sovereignty Commission records, but the event that preceded that was I saw the movie Mississippi Burning, but I saw it with two agents, FBI agents, who investigated the case. So that was really the most, it kind of began my journey, and that's why I start the book with it. And because after the movie was over with, I basically started peppering them, and there was a journalist there too who covered it, peppered all three of them. I kind of, at that point in time, I was like 29 years old. So I thought of them as kind of three old men, and peppered them with questions. All the other journalists ran away, and I stuck behind. But what I couldn't wrap my head around is, hey, nobody got prosecuted for murder in this case. I mean, there were more than 20 Klansmen involved in killing these three young men, and nobody ever been prosecuted for murder. I just couldn't figure it. I mean, that was the part I couldn't wrap my head around. So,
one of the things you wrote in the book, I want to read from it because I just found it stunning. and it's about Byron Della Beckwith.
Yeah.
But this is the kind of I mean, and you write about going to his house and not, not eating the sandwich and all that. But you said this. It says, I mean, this is Beckwith had also claimed Adam and Eve were white people.
Yep.
The serpent, Satan, had sex with Eve, who gave birth to Cain, the first Jew.
Yeah, that's what he's telling me. That's part of Christian identity. It's pretty racist religion. It's not mainstream Christianity. Obviously, I'm a Christian myself. It's kind of a lot of times violent offshoot of Christianity, or at least parts of it have been violent for sure. It's pretty hardly racist. They believe Adam and Eve were white people. They believe all the non-white races were created on the sixth day, and they're called mud people. So, Black, Hispanic, Asian. I mean, all those are included in the mud people, according to Christian identity. In fact, one of the early people I interviewed lived in Harrison, Arkansas. I'll think of his name in a minute, but he was connected with David Duke at one point. He's a Christian identity minister. I'll think of his name in a minute.
Jerry, these the stories of all these killers, did they all know each other? Or some of them did, I know, but were they connected?
Oh yeah.
So
like Beckwith was a member of the White Knights, which also killed the 3 civil rights workers, the 3 young men. I mean, all these Klan guys were all, in the same circles. A lot of them. Now, after 64, then once you got a certain ways into later in 64, United Klans were not over in Mississippi. That was kind of an Alabama group. Were run by Robert Shelton. But then after at some point in 64, they began to kind of recruit into Mississippi, which I got to be honest, I think the FBI was behind some of that. They were trying to sow, dissension by trying to break them up, make them leave the group and start another group. And you know what I mean? The FBI was all about that, trying to disrupt the group harmony, so to speak.
I've read a book, Jerry, and I can't remember. Actually, I gave it to our minister, but it talked about the role of the mainstream churches in Jackson, the First Baptist Church.
Oh yeah,
that was Ross Barnett's church.
Yep.
But the first Methodist Church was in the middle of this, and I presume the president.
Galloway is a real famous church in Jackson, downtown Jackson, and they famously turned, almost all of these churches we're talking about turned away anyone Black who tried to go there. There's kind of a series of, those don't get talked about much, but there was kind of a series, for lack of a better term, sit-ins or whatever you would call them, church ins. They kind of try to attend the church, and there were a number of turned away. In fact, Byron D. Beckwith, I know this is true because I've heard it. I know about it from having read about it, but I also know it directly from Beckwith's son, who told me, confirmed it. Is Byron D. Beckwith used to stand outside the Episcopal Church in Greenwood, Mississippi, with his pistol in case anyone Black tried to enter.
Jerry, how were you impacted by the families of the victims? And then can you talk more about the impact all this, I know there were death threats, had on your family, and what?
Sure.
Both of those, both from the family of the victims and then on your family.
Well, with regard to the families of these victims, I mean, I always tell people that's the biggest reward I've gotten in all of this, is getting to know these families that, the Meg Roberts family, the Vernon Damer family, the families of the girls. and then of course Cheney, Goodman, Schwerner families. And I feel, it's an honor to have known them and continue to know them. Myrlie Evers and I talk, regularly, and I'm very good friends with her daughter, Rena. And then the Damers are fantastic. I just love the Damers. And I love them. I talked to Lisa just the other day, Lisa McNair. Her sister was one once killed in the bombing. So I've gotten to know these families pretty well. And that's been a real blessing, I think. And to be honest, I try to make this clear in the book, I knew nothing. I mean, nothing about any of this when I began. I mean, just nothing. I was just a court reporter. I mean, I was not, and I still don't think of myself as necessarily that talented. I just think that I happen to be in the right place at the right time, and certainly feel blessed to have been where I was and at the timing I was, and the fact that all these cases, so many of them took place in Mississippi, to be able to work on those, and then with regard to my own family, yeah, I mean, it was crazy for a while. I remember my daughter did, and both my son and my daughter, had experience, they kind of were wary about talking about my work for obvious reasons. I mean, they were just, I think it just felt weird. I remember my daughter, I think this was when she was in middle school, said, yeah, my dad writes about crazy people. And I know my son, in high school wouldn't really discuss it. He just, it just got weird. And then I mentioned this in the book. I had two neighbors, like one on each side, that knew some of the killers in the Cheney, Goodman, Schwerner killings. I mean, what are the odds? What are the odds that I live next to? I mean, on both sides, I had neighbors that knew some of these guys, were friends with them. Had been, we weren't friends anymore, but they'd been friends, growing up. So
you write in the book that these were young killers who happened to grow old, and that they were, and we saw the pictures, but when they were obviously a lot younger when they killed, and a lot older when they were finally convicted.
Yeah, that's very true.
So, time was not on your side.
No, that's why the title, hence the title, Race Against Time. Yeah.
So talk about that. Talk about maybe the ones that, how you did it, and obviously you talked about in your book, but the ones like, and I use the example of Emmett Till.
Yeah, Emmett Till. I mean, I wrote, my epilogue was much longer. I was going to write about a 50-page epilogue, and my editor was like, "No, you're not." I had all these plans. I was gonna detail all these other cases that I worked on, and nothing ever happened. He was like, "No, we're not going to do that." So I'm like, "Okay." So, but yeah, Emmett Till, for example, I worked on after Beckwith got indicted. Interviewed Emmett Till's mother, and I thought I had, as typical, you kind of pat yourself on the back and congratulate yourself when you, because I thought, oh, I know what, in the Emmett Till case, I don't know. I guess I should detail Emmett Till. I mean, a tiny bit. I'm not going to say much, but he was a 14-year-old from Chicago who was killed actually by a pretty big group of white men, mainly. There were some black men there. I mean, obviously not really there. They were there, I would believe, under, not because of their own will. And it was that point in time in the 50s where, you kind of were beholden, it's that racial patriarchal society, for lack of a better term. But anyway, a number of men were involved in killing him, beating him to death and shooting him, and then getting rid of his body and all that kind of stuff. So But the one thing I realized with the two that got tried, which was Roy Bryant and his brother J.W. Milam, they were acquitted by the all-white jury, which meant you couldn't be tried again for murder, because that's a double jeopardy, which the Constitution says you can't do. But then it dawned on me, it's like, wait a minute, they admitted they kidnapped him. You could prosecute him again for kidnapping. You could prosecute him for kidnapping because they never got charged with kidnapping. And I was so, I was like, oh yeah, that's it, So then I reach out to someone a prosecutor I knew, who I knew was really expert in Mississippi law, and go over and visit him at the DA's office. And he's like, pulls down the book from the shelf and is like, well, the statute that was in existence back then, kidnapping only had a 2-year statute of limitations. I'm like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. So there were so many of those where it was too late, it was just too late. And, too many witnesses were dead, or, all those kinds of things. So there was more, in terms of cases, there were far more that as I put it in my epilogue, far more that I failed to failed in than succeeded in. Yeah.
When we had the 40th anniversary of the 1957 desegregation crisis at Central High School, I helped coordinate that event, and someone asked me, said, well, what do you want to accomplish with this? And I said, well, there's several things, but one of the things I really want to accomplish is that I want the members of the Little Rock Nine to tell their stories.
It's exactly right.
Firsthand, to write their accounts, to do archives, because what we lose from the civil rights movement is the original stories. Now, in the case of Byron Della Beckwith and others, thank goodness, were able to put all these pieces together. And thank goodness, none of the Little Rock Nine were killed, though they were threatened.
Oh yeah, it's certainly horribly treated.
But still, I think that it's really important that these stories be chronicled. And one you chronicled, you went back, which I thought may have been one of your finest hours. Anybody that's ever been to Birmingham, Alabama, and anybody that's ever walked past that 16th Street Baptist Church, and anybody that's ever realized the letter from a Birmingham jail.
Yeah.
But that 16th Street Baptist Church, where those young girls were bombed and killed, you went back and you took them on. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I was. By the way, someone in chat I noticed has mentioned Tom Robb. That is exactly the guy in Harrison, Arkansas. That's who I was thinking of, Reverend Tom Robb. That's the guy. He's a Christian identity guy. And someone mentioned too, I see here about how the family's affected me. And I just want to say real quick, it changed my life. It changed my life. So, but back to Birmingham, one of the last suspects was a guy named Bobby Cherry. And so I went and interviewed Bobby Cherry in Texas. He's in fact not too far from Texarkana. He lived near Tyler, Texas. So I drove over, met him and his wife, took him out for barbecue. And then he was like, I didn't have anything to do with that church bombing. I left that sign shop at 9:45 because I had to get home and watch wrestling. And he pulled out this sworn statement from this woman. Yes, I remember that night where we're all sitting around watching wrestling. And one of the rules in journalism is, you check things out, right? You want to check things out, even if people tell you it doesn't mean it's true. So I got back to the newspaper the next day and talked to our librarian, Susan Garcia, and just said, check with Birmingham News and see what was on TV that night. And she came back to me and said there wasn't any wrestling. So, so his alibi went up in flames. And so he went on trial and he was convicted, and in that case.
Let me ask you this, because you referred to it, and you talked about the modern day cases. And by the way, you probably know this, but Kevin Sack with the New York Times is a good guy, a great reporter. is writing a book on Mother Emanuel.
Oh, good. I didn't know Kevin was working on that. I'm
Yeah,
glad.
Kevin's working on that book, and
I'm glad to hear that. I know
yeah,
Kevin. I hadn't talked to
he's
Kevin
good.
in a while, but he did a great job on the first trial over in Birmingham, and I've known Kevin a long time.
Well, he's doing a book on Mother Emanuel.
I'm glad. It's important.
So, but you talked about the George Floyd, and we've seen Breonna Taylor, and we've seen Michael Brown. We've seen so many that it's and in some cases there has not been justice.
No,
there's not been justice, and we have the victims of these families who are like the victims of the families the families, the victims that you dealt with. So in your Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting, where you're trying to create people to dig deep, look hard, talk about what you see about, because I see a lot of similarities. I see a lot of similarities of unsolved crimes.
yes.
So can you kind of engage a little bit on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, this year feels like a repeat in some ways of 1968. I mean, and as I always say, if we don't, it's not unique to me. I mean, we don't know our history, and it feels like we're repeating it right now. It's all about justice in these cases, in my opinion. You've got, killings. I mean, there's no question they're killings. And is anyone going to be prosecuted for the actual killing? I know, for instance, in Jackson back in 1967, a guy named Ben Brown shot in the back by a law enforcement officer. Anything ever happened? Nope. They never even bothered they could have done ballistics on the weapons. You know what I mean? They could have done all sorts of things to determine who did it. And they chose not to. And I'm including the FBI in that. There were no serious steps really taken to figure out who shot Ben Brown in the back. There have been people that were there and said certain people are the ones that shot, but beyond that, we don't. They could have had forensic evidence, and they didn't get it.
So tell me about the young journalists. How do people engage with I follow you, I read your stuff, but
Well, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's good. How do you, I'm a journalism graduate, so it's really interesting to me and what you're doing.
Yeah,
how do you engage with you?
Yeah, well, the young people, we've kind of been using for various purposes. I mean, we had a couple of interns this summer who worked with us on this continuing project that we've got called Poverty in the Pandemic, which we're very excited about. It's not quite done, but we're very pleased with the content that we've had, and that we reported just the other day about for-profit nursing homes are having almost 3 times the deaths of the nonprofit homes in Mississippi. You've the Mississippi Choctaw, which is a Native American tribe in Mississippi, about 10,000 served by that tribe. They've had more deaths per capita. Well, they've had more deaths total than the states of Hawaii or Alaska or Wyoming. Like more Mississippi Choctaw have died than some entire states of COVID-19. And then we've had, and then on top of that, they have more cases, per capita, twice as many cases per capita than New York City has. And of course, they've been a hot spot and, battled it the whole time. So it's just, it's the Native American, that's kind of a story, if anyone's interested journalistically, that's a story that really hasn't been told much, is that the Native Americans are actually been, with regard to the COVID, have actually been harder hit than any other group racially that I'm aware of in the United States. I'm talking about. So it's very interesting. I'm talking about per capita again, per capita. So yeah, so it's important work, and we're continuing to do that. We've got what we call our Justice Squad, journalism lab / journalism lab that we're running at Millsaps College in Jackson, and they're working on domestic violence. And I've got a few that are also helping me on a murder case where this guy was convicted and there was not a body. There was DNA, but it was mitochondrial DNA. So that's more problematic just from a standpoint of, it's not like you can narrow it down to a particular individual. Anyway, that's.
Which case is that, Jerry? Which case are you?
Bildrick Jackson is the guy's name. It's not a case you would have heard of, but it's, but he's been in prison for like 20 years. And he's just, and the main witness is, suffered from schizophrenia, but the defense wasn't allowed to cross-examine the witness because, on that point, it's like, come on, judge, you got to allow cross-examination. You can't not allow cross-examination on stuff like that. In my opinion, from covering courts.
In the chat, there's a question about Don Lewis, Carol Baskin.
Yeah. Well, someone's asking about that. Actually, I am working on Tiger King. In fact, I just took a call tonight. I've got a tip I'm trying to chase down. I've only written 15,000 words on it so far. I haven't published it yet, but so I hope to have that out by the end of the year, maybe sooner. It's very fascinating. It's a fascinating case. I don't know if it'll ever be solved. I think it's one of those cases it's going to be very difficult. If the authorities had done their job back in when Don Lewis disappeared, it would have been an easier case.
Jerry, the one of the most interesting and I guess enlightening experiences I've had was after a series a few years ago of the shootings of the young Black males. I invited the young Black males at the Clinton School to join me for a voluntary lunch.
Great.
And I with one question, the question I asked over lunch was, what's it like to be young and Black in Arkansas?
Yep.
And I'm neither young nor Black, so I was there, and I said, look, I want to learn, I want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And it was absolutely fascinating. These were graduate students, all of whom had earned undergraduate degrees, some in the profession. It was really amazing to me. And I think it's one of the things that, not to suggest an article for the talented Jerry Mitchell.
Sure.
But I think it's really interesting to do a session, a focus group about young Blacks, about what it's like.
Yeah, what's it like to be Black? And
yeah, because I will tell you that what they said collectively, were things that you read about in these killings, about what the victims and their families are saying. This was, they said this 5 or 6 years ago, but one of the more interesting things they said to me was, I asked them, were there places in Arkansas that they would not go, that they did not feel safe? And they were very honest and candid and said yes, and listed them off.
Yeah, listed them off.
and listed them off. And then I asked them if there was a place in Little Rock where they did not feel safe, and they said at my house. And I said, my gosh, at my house. He said, not in your house, getting to your house.
Yeah.
Can you imagine 4 Black males in a car driving through your neighborhood?
Exactly.
And people be calling the police within 2 minutes. It was a fascinating educational experience.
Yeah. I think it's a good point, and I think that hits the nail on the head, which is for those of us like me, white Southerner, I'm 61 now. And I'm glad I've been a reporter because it's given me a window into this world. I'm talking about even beyond these cases that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And just begin to realize some of the experiences that African Americans go through or have to think about. I mean, you and I wouldn't think anything about that, right? You just go to somebody's house and I mean, that's not on your mind. But the fact that they're having to think about that, I mean, that creates a whole different thing,
It really does. And I say this in your perspective today with what we're seeing, again, not trying to get political, just trying to get national.
No, not at all. I don't mean political.
It seems to me hate groups are on the rise. We saw
that part's true. That part's true.
We also saw what happened, the alleged or thwarted kidnapping and potential killing.
Yeah, well, there's no question. Those guys were, at least the people arrested, are basically radical right, guys, and that's the other part that's troubling, is that these guys have gotten emboldened now. That's my sense. Is the political rhetoric? I'm not pointing fingers at any particular person in saying this, but the political rhetoric has gotten to such a point that they feel emboldened in espousing hate or conspiracy theories. I mean, it used to be conspiracy theories, everybody would laugh, you know what I mean? And now it's like with the social media and the internet, it's like they find a home. Like some of these, we'll take one that's non-political, let's say that the moon landing didn't really happen. You know what I mean? I mean, you can find plenty of people who believe that, so things that would have before, been like, oh, come on, they've got their own, web page and their own following and everything else. So that's the scary part, is they can kind of find each other and congregate. Whereas in the past, they were so minuscule and seemingly harmless.
One of the things you say in your book, which I thought was one of the more powerful comments that you made, was when you said, the only way I could keep these, and I'm paraphrasing, the only way I could keep these cases alive was to keep writing about them.
Exactly.
And you just kept writing and you kept writing and you kept writing. So look ahead. What are you going to keep writing about? I mean, you've talked about in the past. What are you going to keep writing about?
Well, I think that's what we're talking about. I think, for me in my life, I think justice has been kind of a guide star. And if you look to justice, what does justice look like? What should it look like? Then you let that be your guide. I think that's a pretty good guide. Whatever you decide to pursue. And for all of us, I think it's.
The other thing I want to ask you about is that, over the years, the role of newspapers, both in a positive way and in a negative way, have influenced justice-related issues. But the decline of the daily newspaper, the decline of, I mean, I look at the Memphis Commercial Appeal, it's nothing to what it was as I remember.
Man, I mean, you remember, just like I remember, that thing was like really thick in its heyday in the 70s and 80s. I mean, that thing was I didn't get it in my driveway, but you can imagine what kind of thud it made when it hit.
So what do you see? How do the young Jerry Mitchells of the world, do they do that?
I think
internet and so forth.
Yeah, I think we do what we're doing which is nonprofit. For instance, the nonprofit we have is the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting, because we don't want to see investigative reporting go away. Newsrooms nationally have shrunk in half over the past dozen years. So, and the thing that typically goes first is investigative reporting. That's the first thing that goes out the window, because it's like, oh man, that's too much time, we can't afford that, quit doing that. So, or they can't give, quote unquote, do investigative reporting, but they don't give them any time to actually do it. And that's kind of what I'd run into at a certain point with the Clarion Ledger when I was working there. And then they kind of shifted it around so that I did have the time. It was a guy that came in as executive editor, and therefore I started getting more time, which helped. Well, they were very concerned about the daily product, and so I was kind of having to getting dragged over to that. So that's why we started the nonprofit, because we're actually literally giving our stories to people, and of course they've run all around the world. I mean, we've run in the Guardian in London. Front page of USA Today. We've been very, very, very fortunate and worked with ProPublica, and we just got named we just got picked by Microsoft to be among the people chosen to help preserve local journalism. So we're
yeah. Tell me about that. What are you gonna? How's that gonna work? Do you know yet? Or
there are 5 of us, so it's people will be covering Jackson / the Mississippi Delta. So it's us, it's Mississippi Public Broadcasting, it's the Clarion Ledger, it's Mississippi Today, and it's the Jackson Advocate. So it's those 5 journalism organizations. We'll be working together. I think we're going to try and work together on a project. At least it appeared to be, we've only had one mutual, conversation, I guess, about it. But it appears that everyone was in agreement on that topic, on that point. Whereas we hadn't decided what we're going to do it on, but agreed that we'll do it on a particular subject, and everybody will join in, and we'll, as I put it, I said, I'd love to see us do an old-fashioned newspaper campaign. And
well, that'd be cool. That'd be great. Y'all, we're at the end of our session. I want to thank Jerry Mitchell so much for being here.
Hey, I see a note from Jim Guy Tucker here, so yeah, it's good to hear from you, Jim Guy, and hope you're doing all right. I covered Arkansas politics a little bit before I got out, so hope you're doing well.
Governor Tucker, you should visit with him offline.
I'd love to.
He's got a story that you need to hear.
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so we'll connect you. He's got a story you need to hear.
I'd love to hear it.
I want to thank you very much for this.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. And one last thing is, it's not a boring history book or anything like that. It's written like a detective story. I should have mentioned that earlier. So it's not, at least I hope, not boring.
No, it's not boring. It's not the least bit boring. Buy it at Wordsworth Books. It's a really good story. It is, and it's hard to put down because as awful as it is, thank goodness you told it, Jerry.
Well, thank you.
Thank goodness that you told it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, and thank you, Nathan Smith and Cals. Thank you all, everyone who participated. We're glad to have you, and it's been a great evening, Jerry. Keep it up, buddy.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
God bless. Bye-bye.